Mute.
Okay, here's my ID. My name is Reed Zimmerman. And here's my flashcard, only one side. And if everybody could please wave to the audience. Thank you. If I asked you to picture a farm, what would come to mind? Maybe a grassy field, a few chickens, or some cows. When we think of a farm, we don't usually think about fish swimming around in a pond or nets. But the reality is that fish farming or aquaculture is just as important as farming that is done on land. Today, I will be explaining to you what aquaculture is and how it is beneficial to our environment, as well as the negative impacts. By understanding what aquaculture is and the negative and positive impacts, you will not only be able to learn where some of the fish you eat are coming from, but you will also be able to make informed decisions when buying seafood. As a senior at the University of Florida, studying marine science, I have taken numerous courses on aquaculture, and I have studied how it can both help or hurt aquatic conservation. If you go to the first slide of the PowerPoint, you will see an overview of what is going to be discussed today. First, I will explain what aquaculture is and the main types. Second, I will explain the positive impacts it has on our environment. And then third, the negative impacts. I will now go on to explaining what aquaculture is. In today's world, there are two main ways that we obtain our seafood for consumption: through commercial fishing and aquaculture. Commercial fishing involves the catching and selling of wild marine and freshwater organisms for profit. Aquaculture is the breeding and harvesting of aquatic organisms, mainly for human consumption. If you turn to the second slide, you will see the main types of aquaculture. The first one is an open net system where the aquatic organisms are allowed to interact with their surrounding environment. The first picture shows a salmon farm in Maine. The second way is a closed system where the farmed organisms are not allowed to interact with their environment. This is a tilapia farm in Mexico. Whether fish farming is done in an open or closed system, aquaculture is a key practice that continues to grow today. According to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Administration, aquaculture is the fastest growing food production sector. Out of global seafood produced, over 50% of it comes from aquaculture alone. Now that I have described the practice and types of aquaculture, I will move on to its positive impacts. An extremely important benefit of aquaculture is that it can reduce fishing pressure that is exerted by commercial fisheries by reducing the amount of aquatic organisms harvested from the wild. If you turn to the third slide, you will see that the first picture shows the amount of seafood caught by commercial fisheries in the United States. According to the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, the commercial fisheries in the United States had landed 9.3 billion pounds of seafood from 490 different fisheries, or populations of fish of the same species. 70% of these fisheries are overfished, which may cause them to collapse, where the populations of fish would be unable to recover. If you look at the second picture, it shows a comparison of aquaculture and wild-caught fisheries. The aquaculture produced seafood is shown in blue, while wild-caught fish are shown in red. Since over 50% of our seafood comes from aquaculture, it is clear that the demand for seafood would be unable to be met from wild-caught fisheries alone. Even though fish farms have a great potential to reduce fishing pressure, some aquaculture practices are unsustainable. Now I will go over some of the negative impacts that aquaculture has on our environment. According to a peer-reviewed article titled "Effective Aquaculture on World Fish Supplies" by Rossman Naylor, the most harmful types of aquaculture are those that use large quantities of fish meal. And the farms that use the most quantities of fish meal are those that farm for salmon, marine finfish, and shrimp. If you turn to slide 4, you can see a picture of these species. In 2007, the Food and Agriculture Organization reported that 70% of global fish meal was used by aquaculture. Most fish meal comes from forage fish, such as anchovies and herrings. Since forage fish make up an important part of many marine species diets, they must be sustainably harvested. In a news article by Mark Godfrey that was published by the Seafood Source in 2021, he reported that the need for fish meal for aquaculture caused the overfishing of forage fish in the East and South China Sea. This caused a decline of key commercial fish, which could lead to the collapse of many fisheries. Summing up what I have said, aquaculture is an important practice that has both positive and negative impacts. You have learned today what aquaculture is and how it can either reduce or increase fishing pressure depending on the amount of fish meal that is used. You have also learned the positive impacts of aquaculture and the negative impacts of aquaculture. With an estimated world population of 10.9 billion by the end of the century, aquaculture is a promising practice that could help solve the need for food for our populations, as long as sustainable methods are developed. Thank you.
Now, I do have a question
Yes.
I'd like to ask.
What is your question?
So what types of fish can be sustainably farmed?
So the types of fish that are usually sustainably farmed mostly are herbivores or omnivores because they don't require a large input of fish meal. So this could include fish like tilapia, and then a lot of farms like oyster beds or oyster bed farms and clam farms, those are very sustainable because they filter feed, so they don't need any type of fish meal.
I have a question as well about the different types of the fish farms. So in the open source one where they can interact in the environment, would you say that's overall better for the fish since it's more natural and, better for their health and everything? Or is the closed one better
So
where they can't interact?
The open net systems actually tend to cause more issues because there can be disease outbreaks between the farmed organisms since they're usually tightly packed, so that those diseases can transfer out to the wild fisheries.
Oh.
The closed systems don't have as many problems.
Wow, that's the opposite of what I would have thought. That's crazy.
Any more questions?
I had one. So you're talking about the fish meal and how as a result of fish meal being so popular, there's an over farming of the fish, and it was like the Indochina and Asian Sea or whatever it was. Why don't they just go to other places and get those fish, or can you only get them from specifically those regions?
So the fisheries, they're not like a closed system. So what happens over there can also affect areas across the world. So yes, the fish, like the forage fish, such as anchovies and herrings, they do occur in other places, but still overfishing in one place could cause impacts in another. So just moving to a different location wouldn't help the issue. That answers your question.
I do have another question. So with farming, cows produce a lot of methane, and it's a large pollutant, causes quite a bit of, it contributes significantly to climate change. So I guess my question is, how can we ensure that this is done greenly?
How do we make sure fish farms don't pollute the same?
Exactly, correct.
Well, there are more methods that are being developed that are more sustainable. The main one is trying to use less fish meal. So some options are using soybeans for proteins, but they're still being developed because for carnivores fish, especially salmon, they're used to a mixed diet of plants and animals. So mostly the fish meal recipe is trying to be changed to be more sustainable.
Mm.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I guess I have one last one. Why exactly is fish meal itself so bad? Like, I know it leads to, we're saying they have to fish for it, but I mean, do they have to fish for way more fish meal fish than they do the amount of like commercial fish it raises, if that makes sense?
Yes, so the amount of wild caught fish that is put into fish meal actually ends up being more than the amount of fish produced from the farm.
That answers my question.
Okay, well, thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Hey.
Hey.